Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Shake Sales. I'm your host, Maggie, the sales evangelist at Mailshake. And today I am super excited to talk to Penelope Yamauchi. She's a director of candidate experience at Vendition, and she has a passion for helping people break into sales. So Penelope, thank you so much for being here today. Do you mind taking some time to introduce yourself?
Thank you for having me, Maggie. I couldn't be more excited. And just to share a little bit about me, I grew up in Northern California. In my formative years, I competed in swimming, and my mom was my greatest source of inspiration. She had this saying, 3 jobs, 3 kids, $3 in the bank. And she worked her way towards owning a business and a house, and we all went to college on scholarships. So through that experience, it really instilled the value of hard work ethic. And I studied communications while I was in school, thought I wanted to work in sports, actually did so for a couple of years. And over the next decade, realized that my true passion is helping people realize their potential in their sales career. So I've done that in multiple facets, both with helping athletes and now at Vendition, helping both career switchers, recent grads, athletes, veterans, people from all kinds of non-traditional backgrounds who are striving to break into software sales but don't have the resources or the experience to do so. So we help bridge the gap by providing them with a coach, helping them with onboarding, making sure they have resume review, that they practice interviewing before they get into that seat. So we are really grateful to be in a position, Maggie, of helping people on their journey.
That's so amazing. And yeah, I love what you all are doing at Vendition and just your journey to where you are today. And I think it's so important. And as someone who that's why I'm so excited to talk about hiring SDRs is the topic of what we'll be talking about today. And I love it because I started out as an SDR and then I became an SDR recruiter for a company and then went back to being an SDR in AE. And I just personally love sales, but I love the recruiting side of sales too, and talking with people. And like you said, anyone from any background that Vendition can help coach and position in software sales. So I think what you all are doing there is awesome and what we'll dive into a little bit today.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Yeah. So to get right into it. So yeah, you do work with helping and coaching people to break into sales roles, but just thinking in reverse, is there any coaching you wish you could give hiring managers when they're evaluating or interviewing sales reps?
Maggie, I love this question. There are a lot of hiring managers who are used to recruiting SDRs who have SaaS sales experience, and they might be going into an interview approach with the same kind of path that they approach every single interview, wanting to dive into those metrics, figuring out exactly what their quota was, how many cold calls they made per day, how they set themselves apart from teammates and served as a great liaison to that account executive. However, when you're interviewing somebody from a non-traditional background, let's say server, re-emerging mom, veteran, athlete, you as the hiring manager need to take a step back and realize, what are some questions that I could ask in the beginning to get this person comfortable sharing their story and how their adversities might parallel to the SDR role. So how can I ask them about how metrics were measured in your world? Maggie, you mentioned you were a college water polo player. I being a college swimmer, how can we learn how to ask questions to athletes that are parallel to the information we want to know about how they could have the potential to be a great SDR?
Yeah, I love the way you put that too, because it's, and I have even been in experiences where I've heard hiring managers ask that as like the recruiter and I'm passing along a candidate and I'm thinking to myself, like, well, they don't have numbers to go off of, like, say, compared to sales numbers because they've, been a server before, they were a college athlete, or all those scenarios that you said. And I love the 2 things that you mentioned about the things they should look for. It's adversity, like how have they faced adversity? And then how do they go about telling their story too? Because I think a lot of those skills are going to help someone in sales, whether they come from another sales position or they're just starting out in the field too.
You're absolutely right. We often work with folks who are the first in their family to graduate from college, and coming from a family of immigrants, they themselves have served as many adults throughout their entire life, working to help support the family. But if you go about it asking, hey, tell me about yourself and your experience and work, and you don't open up a question like, what's your story? Or tell me about how your values and your upbringing shaped you, that's one way we could flip a question to then get them to open up about their parents who provided everything for them to make them who they are today and how they want to make them proud.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. I love it. Starting broader. What's your story instead of, hey, what was your story when you first got hired as an SDR or something like that? But I love it. That's
Right.
awesome. Hmm. And so, yeah, just kind of shifting gears here, and especially with the people that you work with who are maybe just breaking into sales, from the ground running. Now that plenty of these sales positions are remote, I mean, the both of us are probably remote working right now, but what do you think is the biggest hurdle when hiring remote SDRs?
There are a number of hurdles when it comes to hiring remote SDRs, especially when it comes to the tech stack that they'll need to learn when they initially start the role, learning the
Mm.
product. And then once they get into their groove, let's say past the first 30 days where they've interacted with other people at the company, they learned the functions of different departments, then the challenge becomes how do they effectively run their day where they don't feel like they're on an island, right? So a
Mm.
lot of hiring managers that we work with will have a morning check-in, they'll have interactivity on Slack. Every time somebody's booking an opportunity, they're giving a quick shout out. One thing, I'll give a shout out to our VP of Revenue, Hannah Elliott at Vendition. She would get us together in these little pods and we'd have just like a cold calling power hour. And
Okay.
we'd all be on mute except for the calls that we're making,
Mhm.
obviously, through Salesforce. And every time somebody would have a win, like you could be on a call, but you could see the other person on the side being like, yeah, like
Yeah.
celebrating. And then in
Mhm.
Slack too, Hana would make announcements to the entire company through our Slack channel on, hey, we're doing a competition today. Let's root them on. So we had this momentum and this energy coming from the rest of the
Mhm.
team. And then other things too, when it comes to your own manager or self, you are the owner of your day. So if that starts
Mhm.
with a workout, making sure you're drinking enough water, taking breaks throughout the day, standing up. I love pairing my audio with cold calling. And then as soon as the cold call is over, it jumps to my favorite music and it's
Oh,
connected to
wow.
phone and computer at the same time. So if I have a bad cold call, it'll just jump right into that. And I know I need that energy to keep going, especially during those
Mhm.
blocks where you're making a lot of cold calls.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and I love it. I think it's at the end of the day when we talk about some of the hurdles that we go through with being remote, it all has to do with like how creative can we get with technology and building like a community around it. So like you said, cold call blocks or shouting people out or making them feel like they're not on like a lonely island. Cause I feel like that's the biggest thing for me. I started out as an SDR and a lot of people have in an office. So I felt like for me that was helpful. I think I can, and I did SDR work remotely too, but I remember thinking to myself, like, yeah, I have my group around me in case a call does go bad. So I think having cold calling blocks like that is perfect because you don't feel like you're on that lonely island. And for a lot of people, maybe it's their first time working remote. So it's making sure that, you kind of nip that in the butt before it gets, too isolating.
Yes, and there was a podcast that or rather a panel that I helped
Mhm.
moderate the other day with other sales leaders, and a lot of them had identified that they were creating no barrier to the end of work to the rest of your day as managers.
Mhm.
So they were responding to Slack at any hour of the day, and they weren't themselves taking any PTO, even though they had unlimited PTO policy. And so what they did was, in that self realization, said, I'm going to create that leadership by example and have a hard stop in
Yeah.
my day so that my SDRs don't feel like they need to answer an inbound lead at 9 p.m. before they're
Mhm.
about to go to bed, right? So that's another layer of it that I've really seen that inspiration just funnel into the rest of their teams.
Totally. I think it always comes from leadership and especially with like the unlimited PTO. I talk about this all the time that it can make such a difference just depending on who your manager is. Like if your manager really takes advantage of taking time off, you're going to feel comfortable doing it. And then the reverse is the same. If they're not, you're not going to. And I think I love that as far as like having that barrier at the end of the day, because I don't think there's any excuse for us to get Slack messages at 9 p.m because you can schedule Slack messages now. It's like one of my favorite tools now because I don't want to bother anyone late at night when maybe I am working just because I felt like it that day or broke up the day a certain way.
Absolutely. There's a number of folks that work on different time zones here at
Mhm.
Vendition, and we're cognizant of, okay, even if it takes a second to calculate the hours, making sure you're not slacking someone when they're off work and having dinner.
Yeah, it's important just mentally because even if they aren't responding to it, it's kind of like, ooh, I just got a message about this. What should I do about it? And yeah, I think having those boundaries are awesome and cool that you just spoke about that on a panel. But sweet. And so, talking a little bit more about this SDR role, and I know we talked about it remote and hiring remote there, but we know that the SDR role typically has a high turnover rate. What do you think managers could do to help SDRs stick around?
Yes, there's this sales leader, VP of sales development, a number of different companies, Joe Venuti, and we spoke about this topic on another panel. One of the things they can do is create a tiered system for what it looks like to have mini promotions within the company.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have an idea of like your ICP, buyer persona, playbook, KPIs, quota, okay, great. But now we know there's a huge leap between SDR and AE. We've taken lots of data in communicating with our Vendition alumni. And the number one topic that comes up is how do I get promoted? How do I move up in my career, whether that be marketing, customer success, account executive? So number one, it's opening that door for your SDRs and saying, if you ever want to get set up on a Zoom call with the head of customer success, just to learn about what they do in that department, that you have the freedom to be able to do that, because a lot of SDRs feel like they're overstepping a boundary or they're going to get in trouble if they show curiosity about different departments other than sales. Then when it comes to the sales promotions, how can we promote them to SDR 1, 2, and 3 and figure out what metrics go into earning those promotions, and then what up-leveled skill set outside of that's going to help them. There are many organizations like Gong, for example, who have these tiered programs, but they also have interviews that go into preparing for getting the account executive interview. So it's almost like internal interview prep for those positions that they want to get towards, because it would make sense that they're getting some kind of exposure before they actually do that interview internally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like what you said too, is like for the managers creating this environment where SDRs might not be scared to pivot, because we all know, I mean, the first position I ever worked at, and I hear friends talk about this where they've started as SDRs, but you can do so many different things with it. If your path isn't really, you want to become an AE, then maybe a manager, then, that vertical route. I think there's a lot of great, almost like horizontal routes that you could take too. I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but that you can take as an SDR and go, other places. But I guess that would come from the manager, just like breeding in that confidence to someone that they're able to do that, right?
Absolutely. I've seen little podcast interviews being done within a company on YouTube where SDRs are interviewing people that have gotten promoted to those positions to give exposure. It's that exposure piece that is the most important in making sure that SDRs feel comfortable exploring those conversations, even if they don't actually want to do that. We do that internally here at Vendition, where our career advisors, they're sourcing candidates, and they have so many different directions in which they can go. And so their manager, Janice, created a whole sequence of meetings where they're getting exposure to the different departments at Vendition too.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. Because I mean, I think I don't know why people ever view that as like a bad thing, that people want to learn a little bit more about what might be out there, especially from a manager perspective. Like if sales isn't where they want to be, then yeah, give them the freedom to look elsewhere. And if there's an open position at your company that would match, I mean, they already know your company, your culture, what your product does. Like, might as well give them an opportunity that than just kind of looking at it as a bad way, because I could see it on both sides of like, oh, this person isn't committed. And it's like, they could be very committed to your company. It's just maybe not the right fit. And so I think a lot of the times it's scary, not only for the individual to look into doing something else. And I think that needs to be a little less taboo, because I think a lot of people could go different routes. And I've been a recruiter and realized, hey, I want to step back and go back into sales. And that was the right choice for me. But at least I found the other side and learned that maybe it wasn't the right fit at the time.
Absolutely. Yet there are so many different times internally where I've looked at myself and say, this is energizing me. I feel fulfilled. I'm hitting my goals, but I'm still curious about this one other aspect of my skill set, and leaned into that. And here at Vendition, it turned into working in a position that didn't exist before. So for everyone listening, like, lean into that so much, crush it in your role. But when you remain curious about what else could be out there, you just never know what's going to come your way.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome. And I'm glad we're wrapping up the conversation with that, Penelope, because it is totally true. Don't feel like, if there's a skill set you really like about your certain position, lean into that and ask if there's something that even exists. And if it doesn't, who knows, that might be a position, like you said, that gets created in the time being too. But Penelope, thank you so much for talking with me today about hiring SDRs and going through some of these questions with me. But just to kind of finish it up, any last pieces of advice?
Yes, Maggie, this was a wonderful interview. Thank you for your thoughtful questions. There are a lot of people out there that don't believe they deserve to be in this role because they get intimidated by the technical terms or the background that they need to have. And I'm
Mhm.
speaking to you all right now. You deserve to be in the room. You deserve to be there. And Vendition wants to be that bridge that helps you launch your career in tech sales. So if you want to reach out over LinkedIn, I'm always open to chatting, having a mentorship chat. Penelope Yamauchi, if you type that in LinkedIn, you'll probably find me. So Maggie, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for giving us all information of where we can learn more. Definitely follow Penelope on LinkedIn. She posts great content and is always on different webinars and panels speaking about great stuff. So thanks everyone for listening to another episode of Shake Sales. We'll see you next time. Bye.